All right, you're listening to Interchain Jam, a series on Interchain FM, the Cosmos radio station. If you're looking for Alpha and the Cosmos, look no further because I am your host, Django Unchained. All right, before we get started, I need to remind you guys if you are currently staking to UMI or Comdex on the Interchain FM stake validator, please redelegate because we are sunsetting it by November 1st. And if you're currently staking with us on any of the other chains that we support, thank you very much, as it supports us to keep creating great content over and over again. Speaking of great content, I'm here with Elias Haas from B9 Labs, who is they're running the Interchain Developer Academy. So welcome to the show. We're going to talk about all if you're trying to enlist, we're just going to talk about all of that, all the details.
Cool. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome. How'd you start doing this? Like, why the Developer Academy?
I mean, we've been at this for a really long time. We started in 2015 with Ethereum Solidity classes. We were the first company to offer professional developer courses. And I mean, back then there was really not much around. People were excited to get involved. So, we started then. We've been doing, we ran an academy for a few years for Solidity, and we've been doing a lot of work around developer adoption, really. So helping foundations and chains and ecosystems attract more developers. One of the ways that is most effective is if you do it directly, if you're directly helping people get into the trenches, figure things out, help them with troubleshooting. And we figured out that that's one of the best things we can do. So that's how we got into it.
Cool. Actually, one of the best, most memorable Solidity courses I've ever come across was the Loom one. Do you remember Loom? Uh,
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Crypto Zombies.
Yes.
You play the game and then you have to write some Solidity to like get them to
Yeah.
move or something. Past the checkpoints. Who knows? But it was really cool. That one's memorable. Yeah. How did you start? Like what got you into Cosmos, and how did you start to formulate a curriculum about the stack?
I mean, I met Billy at Death Berlin many years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but it's many years ago. And
Really
I
Renico?
told him
Yeah.
then, whenever you need someone to help you figure out developer adoption, obviously then it was still super early days. If you need someone, let me know. And so a few years later, he called me up and was like, "Look, we need to figure this out. I'm supposed to figure this out. Uh, let's do something." There was not a lot of material. There was not a lot of the documentation was still a bit mixed. So we got involved. And the way that we usually approach curriculum is, uh, you know, a lot of ecosystems approach it like this. They throw out a lot of material and they're like, well, good luck, figure out what you have to do. So the way that we go about this usually is we build kind of a series of interlocking tutorials where, it covers all of the different topics that you need to know. And the end of one tutorial or the end of one module, kind of you can then pick up and do the next one. So either you want to figure out how the bank module works, and you can jump in at that point, check out the code, work with that, or you can actually start at zero and be like, I have no idea how any of this works, go through the whole thing and come from 0 to 100. So we approached it the same way. We built the materials first, and then last year we started running the actual academy. So there is obviously the content is available for free for anyone. The foundation is obviously invested into making this content available. And all of this is freely available on the developer portal, the Cosmos developer portal, the SDK developer portal. But then the Academy takes this one step further. And it's basically, I think the biggest thing about this is that it gives you access to people who know what the usual problems are and who are really good at troubleshooting, helping troubleshoot. Um, because one of the things that we've seen that where developers fall and stop on their learning journey is if there is a problem that they can't figure out quickly enough. And so, one of the big things that the academy does is it helps structure the learning, but it also gives you access to a team of people that can help you when you come to those problems that are just difficult to figure out.
So how is the curriculum structured? What's like foundational at the very beginning, and then what do you start to lead them to as the course gets more advanced?
I mean, it covers it covers everything. So we're starting at, you know what's the SDK, how does it look like, some of the foundational things, and then it covers everything that you need to know to start your own chain, to build your own chain. This is based on an example project. So everything. I think the best way to do this kind of stuff is to have something hands-on, so you can actually write something. You can write an example project. You can see how it evolves. And so in this case, this is a simple game that people develop, a simple checkers game. So it has to be something that has simple rules so that you don't get bogged down in implementing the game rules. And then it's about how do you keep track of scores? So how do you store things on chain? Well, obviously, first of all, how do you set things up? Um, Setting up developer environments, setting up um, everything that you need to do to launch a chain, and then starting to change modules, building out your own modules. The only thing that isn't covered in depth, obviously being a little bit out of scope, is CosmWasm. So there is an introductory module around CosmWasm, and then sending people off to the materials there. But everything else, anything else that you might need to figure out how to launch your own chain, is there.
Yeah, fair enough. What sorts of like what level are the developers or students that tend to join the academy? And do you
One
know
of
if they're
the
all developers, or do they come from various backgrounds?
I mean, these are all developers. So early on, we decided this is kind of like almost like further education. If you're a developer and you're trying to get a foothold into Web3, and you're trying to do something that where you get the advantage um, of the interoperability, uh, this is a really good way of doing this, and it's aimed at a certain type of developer. Because there are developers, we kind of split this up into different groups. There are developers, more like developer entrepreneurs. They're the people who go to early hackathons, who figure things out themselves. This is not necessarily for them. This is for career developers who want to have a structured approach to something and want to have an idea that there is a career after that, or they want to minimize the risk of figuring out how it works. They want to minimize the time spent. Um, so they're all developers. We usually recommend that people don't necessarily get into this unless they have a few years of experience with an object-oriented language. And I mean, this is also why we've implemented a bit of a screening process, because obviously the foundation, the Interchain Foundation, is funding this, which also, by the way, I think is sets the Interchain Foundation apart from many other foundations in Web3 in general, because developer relations and developer adoption is still a bit of an underfunded subject. It's like, you have a bit of a developer adoption team. They go to conferences, they hand out swag, or they do a few talks or something like that. So for the Interchain Foundation to fund a kind of really structured approach like this, I think really sets them apart. Um, but obviously, we want to maximize the funding that goes into this. So there is a screening process. People apply, and they go through a quick screening test that just tests whether they are a skilled developer. And then the best people that have passed through the screening test, they get accepted into a cohort. So there is some filtering going on, and people who can't make it the first time, they'll try again later. They as they improve, they can do it. But it's definitely something where we want to make sure that people who do end up in the course already have enough experience to be able to go through that paradigm shift from a Web2 developer to a Web3 developer, and don't get bogged down into figuring out how to learn any language, or how to figure out the basics of programming.
If they have a foundational knowledge in programming, but not necessarily a grasp of blockchain architecture, are those people good candidates, or does that disqualify them?
I think I don't know what you mean. It's an interesting question. Um, it's a bit of a mix. So in our screening test, we are trying to get an idea for how likely someone is to be able to do that paradigm shift. I remember that's myself because I mean I'm a developer by training, and I started out doing object oriented languages, and then I remember when I started developing with Solidity, I started looking at this in 2014, and I remember it took a whole while until there was a click where it's like the asynchronicity and kind of the probability aspect of it suddenly clicks. And so we're trying to select people a little bit, but it's also something where we're just trying to help them to get that click. So it's designed around the point where suddenly you're like, okay, this is different in these ways. And because the people who are developing the content, they're all developers. So we've all gone through that click. And so, I think we've figured out a way, and based on the feedback we have, where people are following through the content, following through the structure, and then it clicks at some point.
Do you have good data about where these applicants are coming from and what stage in their career they are?
We have some data about this. I mean, it's obviously kind of West heavy because it's English speaking, but it is definitely international. And one of the reasons why the way that this works is people, there is a program that is kind of organized into weeks, because we know roughly an average learner is going to do this much in a week. So an average learner is going to spend 10 hours a week on this content. Some people are going to do it in an hour. Some people are going to need 12, 15, but it's doable within a week. And so they read through the content, they do some exercises, they do kind of some application things. Um, but there aren't any, or there is not like lecture videos, or there are a few lecture videos. There are a few kind of screencasts and things like that, but we consciously wanted to stay away from that, because even if you have difficulties with English, you can run things through a translator and you can probably get through the program even if your English is not perfect. And also asking for advice in a call or in a kind of classroom situation, online classroom situation, is really intimidating for a lot of people. But writing a message, and sometimes even maybe asking a direct message to one of the instructors and running that through translator, it enables more people to be able to participate. And so we've seen people, language has become less of a barrier with this kind of approach. This is consciously why we do this. So we've seen people from all over the world with a heavy, with heavy weight US and Europe, but we've seen um, definitely English speaking countries, Nigeria or Singapore. Generally, there is a presence from Asia. There is a heavy presence from South America. There is an African presence. So people come from all over the world.
Do you see conversions? So for every one graduate, how many of the, or for every like 100, who knows, how many of them actually convert to building something in production?
It's a little bit tricky to figure out exactly, because so we run surveys afterwards, but there is a little bit of a self-selection problem, obviously, because if someone is not in the ecosystem anymore, and they and they receive something that asks them to interact with something that maybe they've left behind, they might not respond as much as someone who's still in the ecosystem. But from our numbers, I mean, we've seen uh, a decent retention rate. Let me just pull this up. Sorry, give me 1 second. Because we run these after cohort surveys, a few weeks to a few months after this is done, and we've seen retention rates, in the 40 to 60% range of people who say that they are still within the ecosystem doing something. We've seen a decent amount of people who are who manage to get the jobs that they applied to, which which tells us that there is enough preparation here, and this is also, we see that people use this as, when they're looking for a job, they say, hey, I've gone through this program, and that's starting to mean something. So I'm happy with the retention rates overall, because I think the baseline retention rate in Web3 over 3 to 4 years is somewhere like 30%. And it seems like that when it comes to standard metrics, we're managing to beat those with our approach. But I don't have exact numbers because it's difficult to keep track of people who might not stay around in the ecosystem.
Yeah, are they, at the end of the day, are they achieving the goals they set out to achieve? Like, what are their goals, by the way? Is it just to generally learn more about how Web3 works, or is it specifically because they want to work in Cosmos, or is it because they think there's a good opportunity to launch an app chain and they could make money off of it? What kind of personality is joining these things?
I mean, we actually get a little bit of everything. So a decent amount of people come in with an idea of like, I have a project and I want to implement it with an app chain. So people that come in with what they want to do, and we definitely have people who are looking for jobs within the ecosystem. And also, there is an allocation of people who've already found a job, because the Interchain Foundation is one of the, like a portion of the people, of the participants, are selected from, or are passed from ecosystem, from co-contributors. So they send people in to train them up, which might be part of their onboarding process. So one of the goals is, I want to get into this as quickly as possible, understand the stack. And then we definitely get, we get a few people who are, who are using this to evaluate, but mostly it's either I want to find a job or I want to start a project. And then there are a few in there that want to be involved in starting a project, but they are more looking for, okay, is this an opportunity where I can find someone to do something with, where I can join an existing project? So there's also a little bit of networking going on. So we see a fair mix, but I think the biggest groups that we see represented are starting your own project and working for an existing company. And that's really, like, that's what we're aiming for. When the Interchain Developer Academy started, one of the biggest things was helping get as many skilled people into the ecosystem, because a lot of co-contributors were hiring, and a lot of that demand was filled. And the secondary focus was always helping people who want to originate new production projects, help them do that. So I'm happy to see that those two groups are kind of the biggest. But yeah, we see a good mix. We see a good spread.
How many applicants tend to apply for one cohort? And of those, how many actually get in?
Actually, we've seen a really good response. So each cohort, we get between 5 and 7,500 people that look at the landing page. And I mean, I've been blown away by conversion rates. This is the teams managed to get really targeted communication out there. So we get between 1,100 and 2,200 applications on the landing page. So they apply, then they attempt the screening test, and then they get accepted or they don't get accepted. So we get between 1,100 and 2,200 registrations, and then we get 350 to 500 people who actually attempt the test, and of those, depending on the cohort, we accept people. So the current cohort, cohort 5, is the current cohort that registrations are open for is going to be 300 people. 250 are collected from the public, and 50 are from co-contributors. So of the people who are going through the screening test, we're going to eventually select 250. So and we've also seen that the skill level of applicants is fairly high. And yeah, I mean, it's been difficult to pick people because
Yeah.
if you have a lot of great people.
Where is the source of applicants coming from? Like, do you see them coming from Web2, like Apple? Are these Square engineers? Can it get more granular than just, I'm a Solidity, or I'm a JavaScript, or I'm a Rust developer?
I mean, a lot of people are from the orbit, from the Cosmos orbit, like people that are curious, that have been curious about Interchain for a while, but have never taken the jump. And this is kind of one of the ways that they end up taking the jump. And then there's a smaller percentage of people that come from the outside and see this as an opportunity. But I think in general in Web3, and I think this is a tricky thing to figure out across the board for any project, is within the breadth of all of the different things that are screaming for attention and screaming for developers. Now, how do you end up standing out? How can you come across as something that is not a scam? How can you come across as something that might be an actually valid and valuable first step into Web3? And I think a lot of the pre-conversion has been done by the work of the Interchain comms team and the different teams in the ecosystem. Programs like this, there's a lot of work that goes into taking someone from have not really knowing anything about Web3 to thinking about Web3 to thinking about, okay, where do I want to go? Finding Interchain, and then we are one of the ways that we can, give them a bit of a kick. They're standing on the diving board, and we're like, okay, go.
I wonder what the long-term vision of this concept is, because I mean, it could be as small as what it currently is, just like a little Coursera course for people to go through, basically, and then get jobs afterwards. But then it could be as big as displacing, universities, right? It's like, yeah, if people can't afford to repay their student loan debt of what, like 20 to 150K, if that, and the value they get is not so hands-on as what they would get in this little buffet course of
Hmm.
a developer academy, then I could foresee people moving towards online education and uh just getting certification from programs like these. So, like, what is there a bigger vision, or is it just, this like little, it's just going to be this little thing?
I mean, I think first, I think actually it's a lot more substantial than many of the other programs in other ecosystems. Like this program has
Sure,
so
sure, sure.
far
Yeah.
had and I mean, I'm I'm not. I'm just saying this program has so far done like 800 participants, which is a large number of highly skilled people to enter an ecosystem. If you think about that, the individual contribution of a developer, like over multiple years, is in the hundreds of thousands. If you're thinking about value created, value added to on top of salary, value added to the ecosystem. But I think vision wise, so Interchain originally, when this was announced, Interchain said, okay, we are training 5,000 developers over the next few years. We're going to commit to that. All right. So that's, I think that's the first step. That's the first stage. And then the next stage is going to be figuring out how to collaborate with other providers, with our how to collaborate with other people, with other providers that are teaching development, and take people from not being a developer to the stage where we can pick up, because it's a very different skill set. It's a very different skill set to work with, to teach people from zero to being a developer, than taking a developer and teach them a specified skill set. So I think direction wise, vision wise, this is going in the direction of collaborating with other organizations, with bootcamps, with providers in the future, and this being an extension. And then it's also, I think what's going to be necessary is a multitude of offerings, right? So I think the direction for Interchain needs to be setting certification standards, because as all of this becomes more professional, uh, as all of this, as more companies move into the space, as companies become bigger, hiring, it's important, even if the early stage developers might not feel that way, but it is important to have things like standardized certification, so that if I'm hiring, all I need to worry about, okay, someone is a cultural fit or not for my team, but I know that they are good at the basics. They're good at what this certificate says. So I think the way that this can grow, the way that this can become bigger, is for the Interchain Foundation to set up certification standards, and for them to be, for there to be multiple education providers. So we would be helping with setting certification standards, but ultimately this will be just one of the options. And so you have courses in different languages, courses that might start at zero where you're not a developer and they take you all the way. I think those are the kind of things that that's the direction that this goes. And then I think ultimately, if depending on how this ecosystem structures itself and how the future looks like, for this to be rather more than a degree, being something like like an apprenticeship, or having structured programs to help people rather than going to university, them going through a track that does development and then specializing in something like Interchain. I think those things are entirely possible, and I think that's largely going to be through partnerships.
Right. I hope that in the future, more programs like these can start to replace universities, since they're, because of all the pitfalls of universities anyway. Does the license and curriculum actually include foundational things like OPSEC?
I mean,
Like, does it also include cryptography, things of that nature?
there are a few things in there, but I mean, we're doing some introductory work around Web3, but like the main thing is, I think the most important thing for a learning, for a learning developer, for a learner, is to figure out best practices as early as possible, right? So what we've done in this course is to outline, there are little kind of info boxes, and there we've outlined, well, first of all, best practices, but then also pitfalls. If you're coming from traditional programming, this works differently to how you expected, or here you need to look out.
Maybe
So I
don't
think
store a hotkey on a centralized
yes,
server hosted by a giant company you don't control.
absolutely. These are exactly the kind of things where we're like, okay, you have to think this differently, and here be careful because this is, and also I think the flip side of this is it's still early days, right? Like the developer tools, I mean, as far as they've come over the past few years, they're still basic, and it's easy to make mistakes if you don't know exactly what you need to look out for. So we're trying to give people as much of this information as possible. And the people who've developed this course, again, they're all developers. They're very security minded. People have auditing backgrounds. People have backgrounds in actually building and deploying smart contracts that run on production. And this has always been really important to us because it is definitely like I think it's the way that we think about this is like responsibility, right? So we're giving people a tool, and that tool they can use to cut a slice of bread or cut themselves or stab someone else, right? And so it's about teaching them how to cut the bread and cut the bread well, and just do that, right? So we've always thought about this, like if you can teach people to build unstoppable machines, you need to teach them really well to make sure that they do it the right way and they do it
Mhm.
ethically. So that's always been part of the way that we do things, and it's definitely a security first kind of mindset behind it.
Mhm. Yeah, and be careful not to get stabbed by a North Korean.
For example, or any of the other groups that might be running around with a much sharper knife and a much bigger knife.
Yeah. Yeah, so in order to participate in this course, is it free? Like, what's the cost structure? Is there a cost?
Absolutely. No,
Mhm.
there's. I mean, the cost is borne by the Interchain
Yeah,
Foundation,
it's
and again, I
subsidized
think
by us. Yeah.
it's which is. I mean, they've invested a lot of money in this over the past year and a half, or the past 2 years. And so they are subsidizing the full cost of the program for participants. People they go to academy.interchain.io, and there is a big button that says apply now, and that's basically it. So you apply, you get the link to the screening test, you go through the screening test, and then the team lets you know as soon as possible whether you're in, and then obviously, have the chance to try again in a later code if you're not, or you'll be part of the cohort and you'll be invited into the channels and into everything. But I think it's also important that the materials are also available. So even if you don't make it into the program, you can still go through. You can still go through the materials. You can still go through mostly the same content as the learners do.
Great. Right. Yeah, I hope this actually evolves into something even more robust that is comparable to what's taught in universities, but it's free. And so
Yeah.
you would make it available to anyone who qualified for, like, got through the application process. And then eventually, hopefully, you start attracting the younger and younger people, like from high school graduation and onwards, so that they could skip university altogether and not become an indentured servitude servant of the state.
And I think the opportunity here is that there are slightly differently aligned interests, because obviously the Interchain Foundation, their interest is to make sure that this is a vibrant ecosystem and that the core contributors and all the other ecosystem companies have everything that they need to grow. So the alignment of interest is clear, and also you know, the companies in the space are interested that there are highly skilled people in the ecosystem. So compared to a traditional environment where there is a direct cost borne by the education provider, and then there is a societal interest, and at some point this was paid for by society. Obviously it's not the same anymore, it's not universally the same, especially in the US. But I think here there is an opportunity to do something, and I think the Interchain Foundation is one of the rare foundations really really doing their work, really investing in developers, investing in bringing more people into the ecosystem. And I think so far it's borne fruit over the past cohorts, 800 people. That is a lot of people to start getting into the ecosystem, and with the retention rates that we've seen, um, this will have definitely had an impact, and we've seen the impact. And then I think the final thing is, and this is one of the joys of working in this line of work, is that when I go to conferences, when I go to different places, I keep seeing people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, B9 Lab, yes, I used to, back in the day, I did the Solidity course. It's changed my life. I was just doing some Web2 stuff, some front end stuff before, and now I run this company, or now I do this, and I'm this contractor here." And I've heard crazy stories about people's life being turned around, and we're seeing similar, we're seeing the beginning of similar feedback for this, where people are saying, this is, I was always interested, but this has really given me the kick in the right direction. I found a job, or I could start implementing my own project. So it is rewarding, and I think it's important to remember, like the Interchain Foundation funds many things. This ecosystem is building many things, but this is one of the things where people's lives are directly impacted. People find new careers, people find new ways of earning money, people maybe find new ways of balancing their work life balance. All of those kind of things, these things are life changing. And so I think, this is not just a program for people to learn code, it's also an opportunity for people to embark on a new adventure. And I think that's for us, that is also one of the rewarding things of this.
Okay. And so for this cohort, the fifth one that you're currently doing, what are the dates? Are there logistics that you need people to know?
So the main program. So first of all, this cohort, go to academy.interchain.io. There is the apply now button, and the main program starts on November the 2nd and runs to December the 21st. And then the exam period is going to be in January. So there's still a little bit of time to apply. We're towards the end of the application period. So I would say, jump in now and do it today. You know, I think the application period is closing on the 23rd of October. So there are still a few weeks left, but do it now, do it today, sign up. I can attest to, it's an exciting program. There are a lot of people. You can, you if you want, you can just learn this. You can do your work. You can finish the program, and then you can do what you want with that. But if you want, this is also a huge opportunity. You get to talk to a lot of other people, and you get to talk to people who know a lot of people in this ecosystem, who know a lot of people in this industry. It's really up to you as the learner, as the participant, to to make the most of this experience. If you want, like, you can talk to the instructors, you can talk to other people, you can talk to designers of the program. Just ask us with specific introductions, questions, whatever. We will do our best to help you fulfilling your dream in within Interchain. So go to academy.interchain.io, sign up, apply, and I hope to see you in the program.
All right. And with that, thanks for coming on the stream, and hope that those of you listening